My name is John Ross, and welcome to Behind the Retouching, where I have images that were submitted to me for evaluation, and I give my best advice that I can on certain areas that can be fixed, as well as different ways that I would approach the same situation in order to create the best looking images. In this video, we're going to be looking at the retouching that was submitted to me by Ramel Adjibi. While this video was created specifically for him, I do feel that there's enough valid information that it's worth your time to watch it as well. In this video, I don't explain all the tools of Photoshop or how I do what I do, simply the concepts behind why I'm actually doing it. So with that, let's go behind the scenes with the art of retouching. So I'm going to drag and drop your image into Photoshop. When I look at your image, you're doing too much. You're trying too hard. You're not letting the image flow. You're trying to emulate or mimic what other people are doing and what you're seeing instead of letting it happen. Basically, throughout yours, you have one layer that's causing a lot of damage to this image that just isn't looking right. I'm going to do mine. I'm going to come into Photoshop with the two of them, and then I'm going to show you what you were doing too much of and what I'm doing and how I approach it. Not that you have to emulate me in any way, shape, or form. I want to stress that. What I do is what I do, and the way that I do it is the way that I do it, and then no way does that mean that you have to do it that way. Okay, so inside of Camera Raw, I'm going to start with this image. Basically, the core problem with this is this background is too green as opposed to the foreground, which has very little detail. So we need to flip that around. Okay, we need more warmth in the foreground and cool in the background. Warm comes forward, cool goes back. So what I'm going to do is, right off the bat, I think I need to drop down the saturation. You know what? I'm going to handle it differently then. So I changed my mind. I'm going to increase the saturation, which is going to take that background up, but I'll handle that separately. I'm looking at the skin tones in here and trying to put some warmth into this image. I am completely ignoring this green background. I'm worrying about the flesh tone to get started. Additionally, she also has this white thing that I'm trying to ignore at this point. I'm just looking for the general skin tone. Now, the problem with this image is, what is the brightest part of this image? The brightest part of this image should be her face. And it doesn't have to be like super bright, but it has to be the brightest to draw your eye into it. What comes forward and is the most obvious is warms and bright in the tones. So the problem that we have here is the brightest part is actually her hand, followed up by this blouse, then her face. So we need to correct this. And again, I will handle this green totally separately. To start, I don't want to lighten her face. I actually like her face. She has detail in it. There's tone, there's texture. I don't want to touch her face. What I do want to do is darken the rest of this. So the easiest way to do that is to click on the local adjustments, otherwise referred to as an adjustment brush. And I'm going to make something about this big, and I'm going to swipe along her arm. It picks up the last settings used, which is otherwise this pink. So after I make that swipe, I bring it back to where it was, and then I can grab the highlights and bring them down. So it's darkening up this hand and this arm in general, so that it isn't quite as bright as it once was. I can grab exposure, but when you do that, also notice it grabs the darker areas too, and I don't want to do that. I would rather create a second pass by creating new, and doing it again along these areas of the hand, which are once again too bright. And if you want to see the difference, you can click this right here, which in the most recent version of Photoshop is down here. Older versions of Photoshop are up here. But you can see the difference. Yes, it's changing the color too, but right here, you can probably see that this is brighter than the faces, and now they're much closer to being even. Another thing that I personally like to do to darken different areas of the image to draw your eye where we want it to. So in this case, all this is too bright. So I'm going to grab the graduated filter, and I'm going to grab the bottom and bring it up. Now right now, -4, way too much. simply this was just somewhere to start. And at this point, I can bring it down just a little bit, just so that it wasn't the brightest part in this entire image. So when I come back over here, you can see that once again, we're starting to balance this image out. All I'm trying to do is fix the tone and a little bit of color at this point. Much to my surprise, I don't think I'm going to do much else. Yeah, at this point, I'm actually pretty happy with it for camera raw. Usually I'll do a lot more of changes in here, but for right now, this is perfectly fine for what I'm doing. So I'm just going to select not open image. If I click open image, it's going to open up the image as a background layer, completely pixelated. However, if I hold down the shift key, it's going to change it to open object. And by doing that, it will give me backward ability to go back into the camera raw if I actually need to. You know what? In this case, it's saying sRGB. For what I'm doing, I don't care, but it should be Adobe RGB. This was a camera raw setting of mine. Okay, so I did it in this order so that I can open up the two of them next to each other and you can compare them. And again, I'm not going to go into great detail, but this will probably just be enough for you to get started. Before I actually compare them, I want to do a couple more changes, one of which is this green, way too bright. So the easiest way to do this is to go select color range, and color range brings up this dialog box. So I don't know why it's 37. I always work on 40. It's an abstract number. I find 40 works pretty well. So I'm going to grab these greens and I'm going to try and do just enough that it's going to grab this. I want this shape. It's going to grab a little bit in the middle. That's okay. I can easily clean this up in a few moments. But this is how I use the settings. And I'll click OK. And now when I have this, I can go into Quick Mask and I can go to my brush. And notice I'm not going to spend any level of time on this. I'm simply cleaning up the mess as best as I can. If this was a real image, obviously I would do way more to it. I would be more attentive to the details. But as this is just for you, I'm not going to. You get the idea. Now, after I do this, I'll often, depending on the situation, but I will often go select, modify, expand a couple pixels. It could be 2, it could be 4. I really don't know. I'll go 4, take a look at it. It's too much, so then I'll go select filter, or sorry, select, modify, expand 2, select, modify, feather of 2. Basically, it just balances out this edge. And even though you can see the overlap, it really doesn't show it because there's a feathering going on. It's not as bad as it actually looks in Photoshop. So once I do this, I'm going to neutralize this green by going hue saturation and simply pulling it back. And I don't know how close I was to the actual original at this point, but I think part of the problem was this choice of using green as the backdrop. I most definitely would not have done that as a photographer. Basically because the green is competing with the yellow in this particular case. But I'm just getting started, so I'll adjust this as I go. But basically because I have the camera raw background here as a smart object, I can adjust this as needed, as well as working on adjustment layers. I can adjust this as needed as well. Completely independent, and I'm not tethered to any particular layers, as it were, that I have to fix, correct, redo. All I have to do is move sliders. It's a very efficient workflow. So as I bring it to this point and I look at what I've just done, basically I can see that the entire image is looking a little too yellow at this point. It's just too much of yellow, not enough magenta, in my opinion. However, I will say this, that what I'm working on here is my classroom computer. This is like the cheapest monitor you could possibly find. So my color is terribly horrible. Like I sit up, I see one color, I come down, I see another color. Because of that, I'll also say that what you're looking at, also encoded in video, may look differently, but All you're trying to do, gather from this, is the choices I'm making and why I'm making them, and I'm trying to verbalize them, as opposed to what you're actually looking at, because I see two completely different things whether I come up or down. Anyway, based on what I'm looking at, overall just too yellow. So in this case, I'll go back to the Camera Raw. I'll just double click on this and it will open up Camera Raw once more. My goal here is to add some more pink to this. And I'll just go okay. I have no idea. I'll see how it looks. Okay, well, good enough. At least it isn't overpowering in yellow. That's all my goal here is. The first thing I'm going to say to you is whatever you want to do is totally your own. It's your art. However, for what we're going to do here during this mentorship, I'm going to turn off this color grading. Because basically, I personally look at color grading, or what you've named color grading, as I don't know what color it should be, so I'm just going to make up really wacky colors because no one's going to argue with really wacky colors. And I think that's a cheap way out. Again, to each their own, but I'm trying for realistic color, and I'm also heavy in my saturations, and I am aware of that. But for what we're doing right now, I'm going to turn off this color grading because I can't judge your color decisions based off of wacky colors. Now we're looking at the two of these images together, and even though I haven't done much on mine, to be 100% honest with you, I mean, all I did was a couple color changes, and the first thing that jumps out at me is yours is completely devoid of detail. Like you have, everything is just pasty looking. It's very smudged. And the biggest problem that yours is coming from is, I think it's this layer 3. No, layer 4. Layer 4, right there. That's your problem. You're trying too hard. You're thinking that you need to do dodge and burn. You don't always need to do dodge and burn. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that this particular layer did too much. Basically, this one, she's looking like a vampire or something. I really don't know. I found in my evaluation that when I turned that off, I was much happier with it. Now, again, this is different styles, and I don't want to trip over that, but I will definitely say that this is closer to what I prefer. So by turning that off, we're closer. The next thing that strikes me is the detail. Yours is lacking detail. You've lost the skin. And if I zoom in on mine right here, and we zoom in on yours right here, the little bumps aside, yes, I'm aware that there's skin blemishes, the pimples or whatever that's going on. I'm aware of those, but you're missing the light. You're missing the texture. Yours is just too flat. It's just pasted over, and that's the core problem of it. Now, I know that at this point, the way that I'm going to tackle this is totally different than anything that you do, and it's also different than what's handled professionally. However, there are different markets. It's very high-end, and they do one market segment, like that Vogue magazine. My market segment is, I have a certain amount of time to do a certain amount of work, and I need to do it as quickly as possible, otherwise I begin to lose money. And because of that, I have a different workflow that allows me to work faster than necessarily them. Because it'll take them 2 or 3 hours, or it'll take me 20 minutes. Huge difference, okay? So I'm just gonna approach this the way that I do it. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily right, but if you do what I do, I think you're going to find it a little bit easier when it comes to the cloning. But I think one of the things that we need to do is to boost up this sharpening before I begin cloning, because cloning is cloning pixels, and I want to get this sharp before I do that. So there are two different approaches to this, basically, that I see. And one way that I would otherwise do it is by clicking on this smart object, I can create a smart filter of sharpen. Again, different ways of approaching it. If I go with smart sharpen, this is the way that I tend to do it in my own business workflow, because that's going to sharpen the eyes and the eyebrows. Possibly for what you're looking for something more along the lines of filter, sharpen, unsharp mask. and then matching these numbers. Let's say I think what I used before was 38 and 3.8 and 0 threshold. And I think this would be more of what you're specifically looking for whatever your market would be. So it's not only sharpening the detail in the eyes and the eyebrows, but it's also enhancing the skin. It's putting more of that detail back in. And if I want to adjust it, I can just double click on our smart filter because it's a smart object. And by doing that, it makes me sound smarter. 38 and 3.8 is the exact number, but whatever. I mean, if you wanted to, you could go 5.8, whatever matches your eye the best. Just keep in mind that the higher you go, the more of these blemishes are going to come out. And in my world, I don't like dealing with more blemishes. I want less blemishes. But to each their own. So whatever. At this point, now I have a choice. The choice is either to do it the hard way or the easy way. I like the easy way 100% of the time. So for me, and I don't care what anybody else does, for me, I will very quickly go up under Filter, Imagenomic, Portraiture. Portraiture is a shortcut. It's a very quick, easy way to do what we want it to do, as long as you don't go overboard, which is also the problem. Now, you can completely do this manually. There are a variety of different techniques. The fast, quick, and easy answer within Portraiture is to turn off these enhancements. You may or may not want the skin tone mask, but at its core, fine is -20, medium is 0, large is +20, and then we simply adjust the threshold. And what that means is when I look at this too much, it's way too much, whatever it does. So I'm going to bring this down to half, which is 10, which is largely, it's enough to get rid of the minor blemishes, but not the big blemishes. But the core here is I don't have to remove every little thing, and I don't need to take all day doing it. Simply, it just knocked the amount of my work in half. So I'm not saying you have to go and buy this or whatever, but this is what I do because I need to move faster at a faster pace. So at this point, it immediately cleaned up a lot of what was going on inside of her forehead, but it still retained a lot of the detail that was there. So I'm going to suck that up, and I'm going to create a cloning layer. Once again, the way that I do it is not necessarily the way that anybody else does it, but I work this way. Let me see here. I use the healing brush. I pick a point that looks generally clean, and I will just begin cleaning up based off of this cloning layer. Now, I have had a professional retoucher look at the work that I've done on effectively my cloning, I suppose, and they say it's not up to their standards. You know what? That's absolutely fine. I get it. You know, different people, different markets, different whatever. And obviously, if someone's going to pay me more money to do this stuff, I will take more time at it. But since they're not, my goal here is to just clean it up as quickly as possible. And generally, the goal here is to just get rid of the worst of this. You know, I mean, this girl looks the way that she looks, and I'm not going to be the one to go and completely redo everything that she essentially is. I realize to us she's just some unknown face, but always keep in mind that imperfections help the saleability of the image. It's more believable when you have these imperfections. If this girl has perfect skin and looks like a porcelain doll, no one's going to believe it. So as you get the idea, I can go through this entire image and clean all this stuff up just like this. But once again, the goal here is I still have that texture and detail. Now, you had previously mentioned that you didn't like this in one of the threads. Now, I liked it. It didn't bother me. Most certainly it doesn't bother me in this context because it's so faint. Other people it didn't bother as well. You wanted to get rid of it. So I'm going to quickly show you different approaches. One approach is to do exactly what you've just seen me do. I'm going to just set a point here with the Alt key option on a Mac and just come in here very slowly and carefully and just start filling in. the worst of this. Now, again, that's just me. I'm just trying to clean it up, and that's how I work, okay? By doing this, you're still going to retain that texture that's coming from over here and apply it to the other area. However, the way that this would be done on a higher end scale is they would be foregoing effectively this smart object and just create a duplicate of it. They'd flatten it to rasterize the layer. Then they would go into a dodge and burn mode, essentially. Now, I noticed that the way that you did dodge and burn using curves is how I would do it. However, this is another way I've seen them do it. I don't do it because, one, I don't like working on this flattened layer, and two, I'm not the biggest fan of it, to be honest with you. But the way I've seen it done is using dodge and burn, midtones, and then drop this down to some ridiculously low number, as well as this one. And a very small brush. They get up really close on it. All right, so what are they on? I'll start with burn. Burn, we're going to take these white points and literally just start tracing them. And because we're burning the lights, it's going to darken them. And to fix this contrasting, we go over to the dodge, and we do the darker ones lighter. And so as you go through this, darkening the light and lightening the dark, you end up balancing out all this texture. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of it, to be honest with you. And I also know that there's a key command shortcut here that allows us to jump. And I don't remember what it is specifically. But it's like alter something that allows me to jump between the two tools. I really don't remember what it was. I don't do this. But really, all they're doing is they're darkening the darks and lightening the contrasting pixels right next to it to even this out a little bit more. And yeah, they literally sit there for 3 hours doing this, which is why I would be fighting a losing battle if I actually did that. So that's how they do it, not how I would do it. I think generally at this point, there are things that I would do, but I want to compare mine to yours at this point and really give you something to understand. When you look at these two layers where I turned off your color grading and I turned off your dodge and burn, yours is very pale. If that's the look you're going for, that's fine. I understand my things are very saturated, but I like the color, I like the punch, I like all the warms coming forward and the cools going backwards. And the other thing I'll point out that even in yours, this face is still darker than what's going on down below. Mine is much more balanced. It's an even image. And this is more of what you're looking to do. So exclude the details. Don't worry about the details. Look at it from an external point of view. Just look at the image and just see what you like on mine, what you don't like on yours, or what you don't like on mine, and what you do like in yours, and understand that and embrace that. And that is your goal. All these details are minor, and they aren't the things that we're going to be worrying about as a first round. I guess one of the big things I'm trying to get across to you at this point is that you've overworked yours. You've tried way too hard. You've lost immense amounts of detail that otherwise could have come back by using the unsharp mask technique is one way to have done it. Also balance your tones. Again, mine often is darker down below and lighter to pull your eye up because the eye ignores the dark and gets drawn towards the light. Mine is much more balanced, simply because I felt if I did it again that this would just get a little too dark. And for what it is, it's absolutely fine just the way that it is. Now, the next thing that I would like for you to do, other than maybe thinking a little bit more about what you did, what I've had to say and show, more specific things that I would talk about to you are, other than the skin being completely devoid of this detail that it should definitely have, even if you look at any of the other professional ones, these are not softened like this, not even close. And if I hide all this, like all these extraneous layers, you have something going on here. And somewhere along the way you lost it. It isn't even at your healing. It's right here. Whatever you did here is where you began to lose the contours of the face. Because as soon as you entered this dodge and burn, you did too much. Okay? Because there is no lighting that's happening anymore. She has a little bit under here, but she's just very flat. And it lacks the curvature of the nose, the curvature of the nostrils, the curvature of the lips, curvature of the face. Don't lose that detail. There are other ways we can enhance it. However, I will say what I do like that you did, that you separated it with the curve. A lot of people do it using this gray layer, and they'll do dodge and burn on top of that. And I absolutely hate that, primarily because it's inaccurate. If you actually try doing it this other way, using that gray overlay version, it doesn't grab all the lights or all the darks or all the midtones, and it only goes so far. You're going to get much better dramatic results doing it the way that you did it. So great, do it some more like that. You just need to calm it down, tone it back, don't do it as much. Even very simply, we could probably just grab the opacity and bring the opacity down. I mean, I have no idea specifically here, but you know, even that, it helps it. I can come up here to this one. Okay. So it's okay to go heavy-handed on this. You know, do what you need to do to get it to show up, but then drop down the opacity. Even if I was to do it the same way that you did it, I would totally drop down that opacity and just find something that does what I want, but isn't heavy-handed. That's very important. You do the best work when no one knows you did anything at all. And the way that you did it, it was clearly obvious you did something. I mean, even at that, I think it looks so much better. But again, that's just my take on it. This is another layer. It's too much. It's way too heavy-handed. I don't even know what it's for, but there you go. This one, this particular layer, I know it has something going on it. I mean, it's clearly obvious you did something, but when I turn it off and on, it looks the same. I don't know I know what it's supposed to do, but it's not really doing it. So as far as I'm concerned, you can just turn it off. It's not helping. This one, okay, this one was interesting because you were heading in the right direction, but you got a little sidetracked. Here with this one, it's highlighting her forehead. See that's where you're drawing my eye. You were going in the right direction, but you have to follow the cross of the face. And that needed to come down the nose, and it needed to hit across these cheeks a little bit. It has to balance the face while enhance it, instead of just right there on the forehead. Okay. This one, that one I actually like. It brightened up the image. Fine. This is the one I hated. I mean, this one just looks like she got punched in the face several times. Because you're even outlining the face, you're outlining the eyes, you're outlining the nose again. It's too much. Perhaps if I took this opacity, dropped it down, but if I did that, it is a low number. All right, so I think that's already better. The eyes. What I did like is that you enhanced the eyes. If you didn't, that would have been something that I would say that you need to do. It is a way of the market that these eyes are left very dark, but it's another market that these eyes are opened up and they're turned into spheres and they're very colorful. Look at perhaps a Revlon ad or ladies' makeup around the eyes. You know, they always have these really deep, punchy, detailed eyes, and that's what I gravitate to. I'm not so sure about brightening the bottoms with that white. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I just find it slightly unusual. It's not usual that you see catch lights like that. So, the lips. Whatever's going on in this lips, don't do that. I see what you did. You're trying to enhance the lips by following whatever this makeup artist did. The problem here is you're emphasizing the makeup artist's negative skills. Like, this is not very good. I mean, you can clearly see she isn't even, I'm assuming it's a woman, but the makeup artist isn't even writing along the lips. Okay, there's gaps in here because they're either inexperienced or they're trying for some particular look. And when it was like this, it was fine. It didn't really bother me. I didn't notice it until it got so bright when you punched it all up. And if you're going to do that, then you should be coming closer to the actual lip shape. And even at this, I find these edges a little too harsh. These edges are just too much. Just because I see it here, extra layers, if they're not doing anything, get rid of them unless you actually need them for something. But otherwise, they just add to the bloat of the image. So I'm not against that you change the color of the lips or whatever, but it just struck me as uneven at this point because it was too much. And oddly, I can even say I ended up with a near similar color without having to go through whatever work you did on your side. I simply tackled it on the front end. I actually did like this one. It added more depth to the hair. It added more dimension. So I did like that. Certainly I like that. And I could easily drag that over to my image because I do like it. Her hair is definitely too yellow at this point, but I'm not going that far to correct with you at this point. There was one other thing that was really bothering me that we're going to need to work on. And that's going to be flyaway hair. With your flyaway hair, you left it all behind. And so effectively, all of this stray stuff just looks like messy hair. Now, there's a time and a place. There are reasons for it. There's reasons to remove it. And I'm not saying completely give her a haircut. I am saying we do have to get rid of the minor ones that are making this just look like a rat's nest. We have to clean this up. And there are many different ways that you can approach cleaning it up, one of which is to just go to a cloning layer and just start cloning, maybe even with a spot healing. Always make sure it's on content aware though. And doing it that way, I mean, that's quick and easy enough. If you wanted to get more involved in this, there's another way to approach cleaning up hair, and see how quickly I can do this. I'm going to create a new layer. So I have a new blank layer. And I'm going to take the clone stamp. I'm going to bring this up in size, and it's already soft. All right, so we'll make this 20%, fine, whatever. So turning that off for the moment. If we turn that off and we simply paint over her hair just like this, don't overthink it. It's very easy to overthink it. Don't. Go cut right in. Obviously, you're going to have to modify this to some degree to get all this right, but no detail. Just make sure that it blends kind of, sort of, but not really. Really doesn't matter. I'm more concerned about this type of thing, so I'll come over to the healing here just to tighten this up a bit. All right. So it seems really funny that I do it like this, but watch what's going to happen. I'm going to take that layer, which has just this amount of hair covering on it, and I'm going to put a mask on it. I'm going to fill it with black. Edit, fill, black. Foreground color. Okay, so now that basically just gets rid of that effect that I just did. Now I can come back in here with a paintbrush. Go to white instead. Soften this to 20%. Now I can literally just paint back in right over these hairs. Get that? I don't have to think about this at all. Yep, I'm just using a regular paintbrush. Now your choices that you make on this will either be too much and it'll make her look like she has a like she had a direct haircut and it'll look fake, or you're going to do just enough to make it look better than it was. So that means that this is too much. So I simply flip this around, and I'll actually drop this opacity down to 20%. And I'm painting right on this mask. All right. Let's see here. This is the easy way to get rid of flyaway hairs. Very easy. Right now I'm on an opacity of 20% and just clicking a bunch of times. 100% and 20%. All you have to do is bang just the number on the keyboard. 2 makes it 20%. 0 makes it 100%. You get the idea. All right. So once again, all I did was basically just kind of clean up the hair a bit and this. Now we have a problem where we have this deep saturated green again. So we simply need to adjust this mask. Possibly. No. Nah, we're fine. So if and I said that this saturation was a little bit too much, which I'm kind of thinking it is, maybe a little bit, I can go back into the raw. Why not? Actually, I can't because I cloned here, right? So I did all this cloning, so I can't go back into the raw at this point. So I'll just simply grab a hue saturation. Yes, another one, doesn't matter. And I'll just drop this down a little bit. Then, of course, if ever you felt compelled, you can do any of the different color changes. That's completely up to you. Again, I'm not trying to judge. I'm just saying for what we're doing here, I want to keep this clean. I want to keep this bright, and I want to show that you have an understanding of the color and the ramifications of changing different colors. So that was at this step, and I really haven't done too much to this image. I mean, I spent, 45 minutes here talking to you and explaining things, but in the reality of it, I would have done this in about 15 minutes. I would have just sat there, boom, 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 done. The only other thing that really strikes me about this that I would actually do, I mean, yeah, I'd pay a little bit more attention to flyaway hairs and things that I made choices on, but the other thing is going to be the eyes. I think the eyes are very important, so since I didn't address how I would do this, I have a couple different ways, but a very quick way is just going to quick mask. And I'll just outline them like this. I know it's quite a hack job, but I'll flip this around, fix the round, fix the round. Come out of quick mask and enhance the brightness. And I want to enhance the color, but I want one mask. So to do this, I'm going to create a group folder, put this curve into the group folder, name it Iris, drag the mask onto this group folder. Now I can create a new hue saturation inside of here and bump up that color. Now that I have one mask, I can come back to the mask, flip this around, and I'm going to come across the top of this so that I'm not altering what would otherwise be shadow. I'm trying to keep the sphere of the eye, to keep it round. Okay, there's Iris hue saturation. I'll put this up top. It's not going to affect that, right? No, okay. All right, that's an overall. So the reason I put it up top is because I put this inside of an OA folder for overall. It covers the entire image. Put that on top, the iris down here. This is the grass, Flyaway Hair. It's not doing a normal key command. Okay, so in this case, I have a couple layers. I have them nicely neat and organized. I did like that about yours as well, that you had names, things were broken up, and I could see different stages and steps of what needed to happen. So here's the difference between what you did and what I did. And all other things considered and personal styles and tastes aside, I hope that you can see that I've been able to retain the detail, remove the excess hair. I even have a little bit more punch inside of the eyes that are coming forward, and I've dimmed down here. But for right now, I probably think that you could do a much better job by seeing what I did and implementing some of these steps in the way that I approach the situation. Again, you don't have to do everything 100% the way that I did, but I'm hoping you're getting away something out of the past 50 minutes that we spent talking about this.